Hello, this session is brought to you by Grand Canyon University Canyon Professional Development Team. Our session is entitled Collaborative Teams, Data Guided Decisions. And my name is Cece Bosma. I'm excited to share with you what I have learned in my 17 years in education about working with teacher teams and gathering data through assessments. And it may seem kind of like a dull topic, but I guarantee you it really isn't. So come along and we're going to find out how we can really dig in to our assessment system and get that data that we need to drive our instruction and ultimately help our students with their learning. Here's just a few quotes about data. Data might kind of seem like a sort of a daunting topic, but it really isn't. There's some fairly easy ways that we can gather data and then use that data to inform how we teach and how our students learn. And here's just a couple of quotes that kind of help us think about why do we need that data. And the first one is, data by itself is useless. Data is only useful if you apply it. And that is so true. Oftentimes we hear a lot about data gathering, but it's how we use that data that makes the most impact. And that's brought to us by Todd Park. He is an entrepreneur and technology guru. And then another one, without data, all we have is opinions. And certainly I have struggled with trying to teach off of my opinions, but I always find that when I go to the data, I have a much firmer foundation, and my efforts are far better at achieving great results when I have data behind that decision-making process. And that's brought to us by Edward Deming, and he is an engineer guru that often has to use data in his own field of interest. So how are we going to go about this today? So here are some goals that we have. We want to be able to equip you with some practical strategies to build a balanced assessment system. So yes, there's groups of folks that have come together and they have created sort of the framework that we need, and it's been titled Balanced Assessment System. So we're going to take a look at what that is. And then I want you to have some tools and techniques that you can use to gather both quantitative and qualitative data that you're going to need to then be able to leverage that data from multiple sources in order to track progress and measure the impact of your collaborative efforts with your teacher groups. So I do have a takeaway container because I want you to be thinking about what are you going to be taking away from our workshop here. We want this time to be useful for you. So be taking notes. There's going to be a lot of resources that go with this session. And also, certainly, if you have not done part one, this is part two. If you haven't done part one, I would really urge you to go back and check out part one before you hit part two. The one follows the other. And then we've talked about data, we get that data from assessment. And assessment is today's means of modifying tomorrow's instruction. And Carol Ann Tomlinson is the guru of differentiated instruction, and you need that assessment data to know how to differentiate. And so I just wanted to share that with you, making that connection between the data and the assessments. So let's get thinking about, what does this look like? And I want to start by sharing the big picture that's involved in a balanced assessment system. We have the student and grade level standards that dictate instructional content. And now we need to make sure that our students are learning the content necessary for the mastery of standards. And that is where that diagnostic assessment comes in. We want to know where we're starting. And then we want to constantly monitor progress towards mastery so that we can look for gaps and closures. We don't want to wait for surprises with just a final assessment at the end. And so we do this by monitoring progress through using just the right assessments and gathering that data and analyzing it as we go. Imagine that you're on a weight loss journey with a goal of losing 20 pounds in 3 months. Would you only weigh yourself at the end of the 3 months? Or would you track your progress throughout? Education is similar. Assessing learning solely at the end of a unit is like weighing yourself at the finish line. It paints an incomplete picture. And so today we want to explore the benefits of using multiple assessments throughout the learning cycle, rather than relying on a single final test. The traditional approach of a single assessment at the end is not as effective. And traditionally, education often relied on that single high-stakes assessment at the end of a unit or course. And this approach has its advantage in the fact that it is very simplistic and it's easy to administer a score. And standardization also allows for comparison between students and groups of students. However, it also has some limitations. When we're not assessing as we go, there's limited feedback for us as the teachers and for the students. And it provides little or no feedback during the entire learning process. And that hinders the ability for improvement. Those high stakes testing can cause pressure and anxiety that creates stress and test anxiety, and it can negatively impact the performance on the test, and thus not really giving us a clear picture. And that incomplete picture only captures a snapshot of the learning at the end. And in so it neglects the progress and areas of needing improvement. So what if we embrace the journey and provide multiple assessments throughout the learning cycle? Imagine instead having checkpoints throughout your training with a coach providing feedback and adjustments along the way. And that is the power of a multiple assessment. So we have formative assessments, and these are low stakes, ongoing assessments that provide real-time feedback to both students and teachers. And these can be quizzes and exit tickets, observations. And then there's summative assessments, and these are those high stakes assessments that measure the overall mastery at the end of a unit. And it might be an exam, a project, or a presentation. But there are benefits to multiple assessments. We can improve learning. Formative assessments will help us to identify gaps in understanding and allow for adjustments in instruction to address them before the summative assessment. And by so doing, we're going to reduce that anxiety by spreading out assessments over time. The pressure of a single high-stakes test is now lessened. This is also going to help with motivation and engagement. Regular feedback and opportunities to demonstrate progress keep students motivated and engaged in the learning process. We can also personalize the learning. Data from multiple assessments can be used to personalize instruction and cater to the individual student's needs. So we want to find the right balance. While multiple assessments offer numerous benefits, it's important to find balance. Too many assessments can be overwhelming and counterproductive. So consider these factors. Start with learning goals. Align your assessments with the specific learning goals of the units. And then provide choice, because students' needs may require a variety of assessments that cater to different learning styles and abilities. Consider your time and resources. Ensure assessments are manageable within the available time and resources. And just like weighing yourself throughout your weight loss journey provides valuable insight for improvement, Using multiple assessments throughout the learning cycle offers a richer understanding of student progress. And by embracing formative and summative assessments, we can create a more effective and engaging, personalized learning experience for all of our students. So please remember that multiple assessments are not about replacing summative assessments, but rather complementing them. The key is to find balance that works for your students. So high quality assessment design, we want it to be aligned with learning goals. Assessment should measure what students are supposed to be learning. We should also want to think about a variety of formats to cater to different learning styles and abilities. And then also considering the validity and reliability. And when you're working with your teacher teams, we can ensure accuracy and consistency of measurements by having that collaborative team that comes together and considers all of these factors as you progress through a learning unit. We start assessments with a benchmark diagnostic assessment, and this is given to all students. And you can think of these as your compass, providing an initial snapshot of students' prior knowledge and skill levels. And by pinpointing strengths and weaknesses, these assessments guide instructional planning and tailor support to the student's individual needs. And then thinking about formative assessments. And this is where you're probably going to have the most formative assessments, because these you could almost do on a daily basis. You're not probably going to bring every daily formative assessment to your collaborative teacher groups, but as you design these, you'll think about which ones are the significant formative assessments. But formative assessments are like frequent check-ins with your curriculum map, and it offers real-time feedback throughout that learning journey. And as we said before, formative assessments can be all kinds of things, hand to 5, just checking in to see what they think about what they know or feel about a certain topic. How confident are you in completing a long division problem? And they can give all 5 fingers, absolutely confident, down to 1 finger, I'm not sure at all how to even get started. And then you can have those exit tickets that will give you a snapshot of what the students are thinking. And they can be a reflective exit ticket. They could just be answering 1 question or writing to 1 prompt. And when you get those exit tickets, they can be easily sorted into 3 piles. So totally get it, not quite there yet, and still looking to maybe need some more help. So, and then you also have observations, and those allow, and all of those combined allow teachers to adjust the instruction. We can address misconceptions and support that continuous improvement. And then lastly, we have the summative assessment. And like I said earlier, we're not substituting formative assessment for summative assessment. We're still going to do that, but we're going to wait till the end, and we're going to know what the cadence is of the entire group of students by the time we get to that summative assessment. So there's no surprises. Have you ever heard of a teacher coming to you and saying, I'm just fed up with these students. I gave them the final exam today and they just blew it. And I would pose to that teacher that perhaps, let's take a look at how did you find out how the students were doing along the way? Oftentimes, when you're hearing this from a teacher, this is probably a teacher that needs to implement some formative assessments, some real check-ins, so that they can get a snapshot of how their students are doing and adjust their teaching, as well as helping their students to get a snapshot of how they are doing. So here we are at summative assessments, and imagine that you're taking a final measurement of a learning attainment at the end of a unit or course. And these can be exams, projects, or presentations. And they showcase an overall mastery and inform future instruction. And it could also inform like placement as well. So a balanced system, a balanced assessment system utilizes these tools in harmony, avoiding over-reliance on a single one. And by weaving together data from benchmark, formative, and summative assessments, educators can gain a rich tapestry of understanding. Identifying learning gaps, benchmarks illuminate areas requiring additional support. Monitoring progress with formative assessments tracks development and informs adjustment. And then measuring mastery with a summative assessment gauges the overall achievement. And in so doing, helps you chart the course for your teaching journey. Data gleaned from a balanced system empowers educators to personalize learning. We can tailor that instruction to individual strengths and needs, provide timely interventions, offer targeted supports for struggling students, and refine our instructional strategies. Continuously improving our teaching practices is the goal. And the enhanced collaboration will facilitate data-driven discussions and decision-making. So when we're talking about balanced assessments, and that was a lot of information. So what I've done is I've put together a balanced assessment design guide that has all kinds of checkpoints throughout for you to put together a balanced assessment plan. And so I encourage you that as you gather with your collaborative groups of teachers, that you open that balanced assessment guide to help guide your thinking. It covers everything from A to Z. You may not use all the components, and that's okay, but it's going to help you come up with that balanced assessment design for your team. So when we think about those data-driven decisions, data insight for driving decisions, we want to look beyond averages. We're going to use that data to find individual student strengths and weaknesses, not just the group trends. Then we want to think about that actionable feedback. I'm sure you've heard it said that prompt, timely feedback is super important in the learning cycle. So we can translate that data into clear, actionable steps for both the teacher and students. And then we can think about that continuous improvement component. We're going to use data to monitor progress. We're going to adapt instruction and refine our assessment practices. So we've looked at those assessments, and now we're going to look at that data utilization. So I want you to imagine you're navigating a new city. You wouldn't rely on a single map or signpost, right? You'd use multiple sources of information to guide your journey. And that's precisely what a balanced assessment system does for education. It is like a GPS for learning, providing a comprehensive view of students' progress and helping us make informed decisions to support each student's individual path. So in a balanced assessment system, data isn't just numbers on a page. We're going to use it as a powerful tool for understanding our students' strengths, weaknesses, and growth. And it helps us to answer key questions such as, where are the students excelling? Where do they need additional support? Are our instructional strategies working? How can we personalize learning to meet individual needs? And then there are types of assessments and data. A balanced system includes 3 key types of assessments that provide different types of data. And we've looked at those. We've got the benchmark screeners, we've got our formative assessments, and then our summative assessments. Now we have to utilize our data. And here's how we put data to work in a balanced system. We're going to analyze that data collaboratively. Teachers and teams work together to analyze assessment results, identifying patterns and trends. We want to identify areas for improvement, and data can pinpoint specific areas where students need additional support or where instructional strategies could be refined. We develop an action plan based on those data insights, and educators can create targeted interventions to differentiate instruction or adjust curriculum pacing to meet the individual needs of students. And then, of course, we want to monitor progress. Data is used to track those formative assessments. We're going to use data to track the effectiveness of interventions and make further adjustments as needed. And we can definitely benefit from data utilization. When we use data effectively in a balanced system, it can lead to improved student learning and achievement, more personalized, targeted instruction, and transparency. Data is a powerful guide, but it is not the destination. It is a tool to help us create meaningful learning experiences. We can empower our students and ensure every student reaches their full potential by embracing a balanced assessment system and using the data thoughtfully. So, data-driven instruction is a continuous improvement process that uses assessment data to inform and adjust our teaching and learning. It's a cycle of gathering data through the assessments, analyzing it, and then taking action, and then repeating that process continuously. So it's not about teaching to the test, but about using data to make better decisions about how to help all students succeed. The cycle is assessment. We want to gather that data about student learning through various methods. Then we're going to analyze and interpret the data to identify patterns, trends, and areas for improvement. Then we need to consider, what action are we going to take? How are we going to use the insights from the data to plan and implement instructional interventions and adjustments? And we want to align our assessments with those learning goals and use multiple methods to capture diverse learning styles. It is also really important that we gather data frequently to track it. And when we think about gathering data, I want us to take a look at the formative assessment cycle in particular. So here we have designing a formative assessment, because you're going to use these most frequently. So the first thing that you want to do is align your formative assessment with learning goals. So this is a learning goal is a sub part. There's going to be many learning goals with any particular standard. So you're going to choose one of those learning goals to drive that formative assessment that you're creating. And think about the diverse formats. And in the next screen, we're going to take a look at several formats of formative assessment, several ways that we can do that. And if you can include that real-world application into your formative assessment, that all the better, to really see if they're getting the full understanding of the material. Then thinking about ongoing feedback. When we are using assessments, we want to make sure that we are providing timely feedback. And also, and that's going to be based on your data analysis, and you're going to create feedback, and then you're also going to reflect and refine the next day's instruction. Based on if the students are getting it, you're going to keep moving forward. If there are maybe is a subsection of students that are showing some struggle, some need for some more to cover that information some further, think of a new way to address that learning and come back to it. So we want to reflect and refine on a regular basis. And this cycle is ongoing. And then thinking about formative assessment, there's lots of formative assessments. These are just a few. You can use simulations. Having them act something out can really inform you about what their understanding is. And hang on to these ideas because we're going to use them as we go into the two different types of data that we can gather, both qualitative and quantitative. So there's simulations and in science, we often have simulations as they work through perhaps the cloud cycle or how the groundwater and water cycle. So there's simulations that can be used as a type of formative assessment. Presentations, just a quick presentation from the students, have the students teach another student the material. Those types of interactions are a formative assessment. Then exit tickets, we already talked about exit tickets. Showing those fingers, how well do you understand? Give me a fist of 5. A quick check. Using technology like Mentimeter or Google Forms, you can quickly find out what students' understanding is by giving them just a quick check on what they are thinking. And that can even come in the form of think, pair, share. Listening in to what the students are saying during the think, pair, share based on your prompt is really going to inform what they are understanding and where they might still have some gaps. Give them an observation task. And certainly student reflection, written student reflection, perhaps that's a portion of the notebook that they have is doing the student reflection. And then we already talked about think, pair, share. So, and there's a lot of other Kagan strategies as well that you could use. And all of those can be a type of formative assessment. So, and these are just a few. There's many, many other formative assessments that we could talk about. So from the assessments, we can gather quantitative data. Now, quantitative data is kind of simple. It's the number data, right? And these are measurable numbers generated from assessments like scores, percentages, and completion rates. And while qualitative feedback holds valuable insights, quantifiable data will offer that standardized basis for analysis and comparison. So oftentimes, if you can churn data into a number, it does make for a quicker analysis. It transitions into that analysis phase much more smoothly. And when we're using those formative assessments, that's that real-time feedback that tells us, and it's feeding us, it's giving us feedback on what the students understand and what needs to be adjusted. And then we can also use what we learn and then turn around and provide students with feedback. So we can address emerging gaps. And then we have those summative assessments, and these are at the end of the unit or course assessment. And these, like we have said, exams, projects, essays, are all used to show mastery of learning and should be aligned to objectives. Once we have that data, we want to turn those numbers into action. So we're going to identify areas for improvement, analyze data trends, look beyond the individual scores and examine some class-wide patterns. You can see patterns in those numbers. Are specific questions consistently being missed? Are certain concepts proving challenging? Compare your formative data with your summative data. Are there discrepancies? Identify those. What's the difference? What are some discrepancies that you're seeing between ongoing performance and final outcomes? Where are students underperforming despite initial progress? With that data, you can tailor instruction. And this is where we can differentiate our instruction based on data insights. Differentiate instruction to cater to individual needs. Create small group activities for struggling students and challenge high achievers with extension tests. These targeted interventions are designed with specific strategies to identify weaknesses. And the focus is on reteaching specific concepts, not just reteaching the whole thing, because you don't have enough time. And so when we use this data to really guide our instruction, we get really specific. And we can provide that additional practice for what the students specifically need it for. And this makes it very personalized. And then we're monitoring progress. We're going to track the individual and group progress and use data from our formative assessments to monitor how students are responding to those interventions. And we can adjust strategies as needed. And it's so important to remember to celebrate successes, and they're everywhere. Acknowledge and celebrate students' progress alongside those areas for improvement. This will encourage and motivate and reinforce a positive learning environment. Remember, sometimes we think even this topic of data, oh, it's so dull, but we want to keep our students motivated. And knowing that data can really change the way we teach and make some incredible improvements on how we can tailor what we're teaching to our students and really address their needs in real time. That's such a huge thing. And so you want to think about that when you're with your students. Keep them motivated. How can I motivate them? Yes, I'm going to tell them that we're going to take another look at long division, but I'm so proud of you guys because you've got the format. Your format's great, and we're going to tweak some of these calculations that are getting in the way of your success. So we're gonna get you there, right? So data is just one piece of the puzzle. Consider context, student background, and individual learning styles alongside of that quantitative data when making decisions. And then use that collaboration. It is key. Share data and insights with your colleagues to collectively design effective interventions and refine your instructional practices. Oftentimes, it's hard when we're collaborating with a group of teachers to be vulnerable, as well as sometimes I think I did it when I was teaching, that if I did come up with something that really worked well, I almost wanted to hide it and keep it for myself, as if just misguided thought that it was somehow a competition, and it really isn't. You want to be in a team you're not competing with your teammates, you're encouraging them. So using that collective thought to design effective interventions and refine those instructional practices. Lean into that team thought. Focus on growth, not just scores. Use data to guide your journey and not define your destination. Always, just like you do with your students, celebrate your progress with your team. By embracing that quantitative and the quantitative data from formative and summative assessments, you can navigate the learning landscape with clarity and purpose. Remember, the numbers aren't the destination, but a valuable tool for empowering effective instruction, personalized learning, and ultimately guiding every student towards reaching success. And isn't that why we do it? So that's our quantitative data. But then we also have qualitative data. And we're going to dive into the vibrant world of qualitative data. And it's gathered through observations, student expression, such as those think, pair, shares, and artifacts, and discover how it can empower you to make informed decisions and nurture some transformative learning. So let's open the lens of qualitative data. Qualitative data is descriptive. It is not numerical. It comes from our observations of our students as they interact with each other and with the material. Expressions and creations that offer insight into students' learning processes, thoughts, feelings, and motivations. When we're observing our students, we're watching how they interact, collaborate, and engage in learning activities. And this can reveal valuable clues about their understanding, strengths, and areas of difficulty. Thinking about student expression. When we provide open-ended questions, opportunities for reflection, and discussions, we're providing a window into students' perspectives, allowing teachers to understand their interpretations, misconceptions, and unique ways of thinking. And then we have our student artifacts. And this is the work, the projects, the scribbles, and creations. And they serve as a tangible expression of learning. It showcases skill development, creativity, and individual approaches to problem solving. And we can transform this insight into action, building deeper understanding, unveiling misconceptions, observe how students tackle tasks, and analyze their explanations to identify hidden understandings or lingering confusion. Celebrate diverse learning styles. Pay attention to how students engage with the different materials and activities. Uncover preferred learning approaches and potential areas for differentiation. Unlock motivation and engagement. You want to listen to your students' reflections and observe their interactions to understand what ignites their passion and fuels their drive to learn. Nurturing a responsive learning environment includes adapting instruction and using observation and student feedback to modify lesson plans, adjust your pacing, and introduce appropriate scaffolding or challenges to meet the needs of the individual students. So you can design targeted interventions through analyzing student work and reflections to identify specific areas where students are going to need some additional support and practice. And then we can design those personalized strategies to address those specific needs. Enhancing our informative assessment to incorporate qualitative data, such as observation and student explanation, is important, alongside quantitative metrics to create a richer and more nuanced picture of student progress, because we want to foster student agency and growth, validating student perspectives by valuing and incorporating student feedback and expressions. Teachers can build the trust and empower students to become active participants in their learning journey. Promoting self-reflection will encourage students to analyze their own work and learning processes, fostering metacognitive skills and a growth mindset. Celebrate the diverse solutions, appreciate and learn from those unique approaches that students take to solve problems and express their understanding. Value their creativity and creative thinking, critical thinking and creative thinking. And remember, embrace the subjectivity. Qualitative data offers you a personal perspective and interpretations, making it crucial to consider context and avoid drawing those universal conclusions from individual anecdotes. And then when we triangulate the data, combine qualitative data with quantitative measures and other sources of information, we are creating a complete picture of student learning. Focus on growth, not just the outcomes. Use qualitative data to understand the learning process, celebrate progress, and guide continuous improvement for both students and teachers. And in conclusion, when we're opening ourselves to the richness of qualitative data, we unlock a deeper understanding of students' learning journeys. And this knowledge is going to empower us to tailor instructional support for individual needs and cultivate a dynamic learning environment where every student thrives. So I want us to make sure that we're embracing our students' expression. Oftentimes, I know in my teaching, I would get sort of a tunnel vision, and I would have these pre-described expectations of my students. And when they didn't meet those in the assessment process, I felt like I didn't see the big picture because I wasn't looking for that qualitative data to really get to understand my students' thinking processes and their creativity. And once I stepped back from worrying about right and wrong so much and trusting the journey and gathering that qualitative data to inform me, I became a much better teacher. So trusting the journey, you will get to a point where you can see how all of this data collection becomes really automatic, not hugely time consuming, and very beneficial for your teaching practice. So once we have the data, we have to analyze the data. And we're going to analyze quantitative data, pinpoint patterns, while qualitative data adds depth and context, revealing the why behind the numbers. We're seeking relationships, looking for connections between quantitative trends and qualitative narratives. Do low scores in specific areas connect to student feedback about confusing explanations? Does high engagement in class discussions translate to improved performances on assessments? We can transform our insights into action, identify specific strengths and weaknesses through qualitative data, and then use that quantitative data to tailor interventions. Struggling with fractions, qualitative observations might reveal confusion with specific manipulatives. Prompting. With prompting, we can personalize practice with different resources. We can differentiate instruction. Quantitative data might show a class struggling with a concept, while the qualitative data sheds light on diverse learning styles. This informs differentiated instruction, offering alternative explanations, activities, and pacing to cater to individual needs. And we don't want to isolate our data points. Consider student background, learning styles, and classroom dynamics when we are interpreting both numbers and narratives. Collaboration is key. Share and discuss data with your colleagues. Brainstorm the solutions, validate interpretations, and refine your decision-making. So thinking back to my own experience with qualitative and quantitative data analysis and how I used to improve my writing instruction and students' performance in persuasive writing argument, persuasive writing assignments. While their average score on the essay assignment was satisfactory, I noticed patterns in the qualitative data revealing a deeper issue hindering their success. In the quantitative data, the average score was 75% on their persuasive essay. 20% scored below 60%, 20% scored below 60%, 50% scored between 60 and 80%, and 30% of the class scored above 80%. Performance on specific criteria, strong scores on grammar and mechanics, but then lower scores on evidence of integration and logical flow of arguments. Qualitative data consisted of students' reflections. Many students expressed difficulty identifying stronger evidence to support their claims in constructing a clear, persuasive structure. My observation during a writing workshop consisted of noticing students struggling with brainstorming effective arguments, or choosing relevant evidence and transitioning smoothly between supporting points. Analysis of student essays showed that several essays lacked a central thesis statement and relied on weak evidence, such as personal anecdotes or just irrelevant examples, and had logical inconsistencies in that argument flow. And then my data analysis and action, through my data analysis and action, I identified the problem. Combining the quantitative and qualitative data identified two key areas that needed improvement. Argument development, the students struggled to brainstorm and choose strong evidence to support their claims, as well as text structure and organization. The essays lacked a clear thesis statement and logical flow of argument. So then I developed some very targeted interventions. I focused on the argument development and introduced some graphic organizers and strategies for brainstorming effective arguments in identifying relevant evidence, explicit instruction, and on text structure also helped. Teach students how to write strong thesis statements and use transitions seamlessly, and structure their essay for a logical flow. I also had to provide personalized feedback, and providing the individual feedback for the students on their essays and just focusing in on those specific areas that I identified through that qualitative analysis, I was then able to monitor the progress through short writing exercises that focused on writing tasks to monitor students' progress in developing that argument and structure their writing. I also incorporated a peer review process and encouraged peer review with a focus on argument strength and essay organization. And as always, when we're using our data analysis to drive instruction, we want to make sure we're differentiating. And so I continued to adapt that instruction based on individual needs that I was continually shifting as I analyzed the data. And what I found when I went in and really dug through and pinpointed these specific areas that needed help after implementing these interventions based on the combined analysis of quantitative and qualitative data, I did observe a significant improvement in students' persuasive writing. In the next essay assignment, the average score increased to 80%, with fewer students scoring below 60%. And more importantly, I saw a marked improvement in the quality of the students' arguments and the structure of their essay. And so as you can see, I worked through that process of assessment, analysis, and then I took action. And I had to go through this cycle numerous times throughout the unit. So I'm going to take a look our final thing is to look at assessment analysis. And so here we have some data that's been captured from a math assessment. Maybe it was a quick 4 or 5 question formative assessment, a check-in along the way. And here we have a question that C, and the correct response was C, but only 17% of the class chose the correct response. And the most frequent response was A. And so through analysis, this teacher was able to identify that perhaps the misconception is because of regrouping. Perhaps they were using a standard algorithm that was misaligned, or it could just boil down to calculation error. Looking at that information, the misconceptions were on regrouping, expanded form, and estimation, giving the teacher a focus for intervention. And they needed to use a number line to reteach and transition to a standard algorithm. This also required assessing place value understandings and looking at how rounding to estimate is important as well. So when we break down the why something is not correct is crucial in our data analysis. So based on this information, this teacher put together an action plan. And so we have just some bookkeeping information up here, and you too have access to this action plan worksheet as well. It is there for you to use in your own action planning within your collaborative teaching groups. So you're going to figure out what are the students, what assessment are you looking at, what is the date, who's the teacher? Are you going to be, does your action plan involve the entire class? Is it going to be small groups? Is it an intervention? Are you just working with an individual? Then you're going to connect your standard. And as you see here, we've got our arrow pointed to the standard. We want to know what standard it is that we are planning for, because of course we are teaching to cover our standards, correct? And then thinking about the skill that needs to be addressed. And here we're going to look at regrouping, and we're going to start by using a number line. Then we want to find out what is the when of this action plan. When and what are we going to do? When are we going to do it, and what are we going to do? So this person still needs to figure out the when. They've created the what of using a number line, and students will place numbers on the line. And then next, students will take numbers in addition scenarios and locate one number on the line. So we've come up with a plan. And so today we've been through a whole lot of information. And in the resources, you are going to find, so now that we've looked at formative assessments, in the resources for this module, you're going to find a an assessment guide. And that's going to give you some clear understanding of both formative and different summative assessment types that you can be thinking about including into your balanced assessment plan. And so I encourage you to refer to that document to help you build your assessment. You have access to the action plan in the resources. You may choose that your action plan needs to look a little bit different, and I encourage you to design your own. But if you would like to use the one that is there in the resources, it is that crucial step. You've created your assessment system. You have your different types of assessment. You're going to gather that data in and bring it to your teams and create an action plan. That documentation is crucial to the success. So think about how that action plan is going to look. And start small. Start with just one skill or sub-skill. You don't have to have a lengthy amount. Just start with one. So now that we've taken a look at how we can use data to guide our decision making, we've come to the end of our module. So I hope that from this, you were able to develop some practical strategies to build a balanced assessment system using the different types of assessment. That you have some tools and techniques for gathering that quantitative and qualitative data. And then I hope that you also were able to see how we can use that data to create a plan. And when we do that in our collaborative groups, it is going to work amazingly. So I thank you for joining us. And as always, our why, we are here to empower, educate, and inspire you, our community of teachers, so that you can take action and continue to fulfill your purpose and serve your community of learners and their families. Thank you.